Good afternoon, and welcome to five Reasons Not to Harm Your Loved Ones During Quarantine. Yes, I'm outside, even though it's a little chilly, but it's still beautiful, and we have to keep the happy things in our life being happy. Today, our topic is going to be who is the friend of the court, and it's an interesting discussion. But before we get there, let me give you a couple of updates of what's happening in the world. The governor will be speaking at 3 p.m. today. It's really, really interesting, and our kids and generations to come are going to look at this time as history. We are looking at a period of time where our checks and balances are being illustrated, and the underlying concepts and notions and the reason we have a constitution, the reason we have three branches of government, are all coming to life right now. So we should be talking to our kids about, although a lot of parents don't want to talk to their kids about COVID and don't want their kids to be scared. This is actually, as much as everyone has their own opinion about it, this is kind of cool. I guess I became a criminal lawyer because I am a constitutional junkie at heart. But so think about this. The governor has powers. She's the executive branch. The legislature has powers. They make the laws. The judicial branch is the judges, and they enforce the laws. And the governor oversees the law, all the other two branches, and they oversee her. And there's checks and balances of where you can go if you think any branch has abused their power. Then you have this little thing called politics. And what we're seeing now is some arm wrestling between the legislature says to the governor, we're not going to extend your state of emergency. The governor says, okay, then I'm going to rely on the Emergency Governors Act of 1945 instead of the Emergency Act of 1976, and I'm going to extend the state of emergency myself. Then the legislature says, okay, but then we're going to the court, to the judicial branch, to see if you're exceeding your power in how you're handling this pandemic. And so legislature is going to file a lawsuit against the governor, against the executive branch for abuse of power. In the meantime, who are we? The people, okay? The people have to follow the orders, obviously. And it's really, really important to understand the difference between the emergency state that has been declared in Michigan versus the emergency stay-at-home order, which is an executive order of the governor. And it's important to understand that distinction, because when our state is declared in a state of emergency, that means that we get funding from different sources, and we are allowed to, through the governor, allowed to have industries shift to make things that are necessary or needed. For example, we have our local breweries making hand sanitizer, distilleries are making hand sanitizer. You have the auto companies making ventilators. You have other industries that have switched their production and manufacturing to make PPE specifically for our state and others who are in a state of emergency, and that is funded both federally and through state resources because we are in a state of emergency. If you look back during the World War times, our base of industry shifted to making tanks and guns and instead of cars, and it's very similar, but in a much more millennial time kind of way. So it's important to understand what the state of emergency is. We've also had state of emergencies declared for things that we don't necessarily think about all the time. And that would be, we've had a state of emergency when we've had, days and days and days of under zero, or I think it was greater than 20 degrees wind chill, where different resources were allowed to be put in place because of that declaration. Or different, whether it was, kids not being allowed to be at the bus stop or whatever it is. So there have been times in the past when it may not have affected each one of us as individually as this does, but this is not the first time that there's been a state of emergency in Michigan or under Governor Whitmer. The stay-at-home order, which is set to expire on May 15th, yes, May 15th. I was thinking maybe it was the 14th. That is right now an executive order. So that was put in place by the governor under her gubernatorial powers that were given to her by the legislature because they established the state of emergency. So that's kind of how it all works together. So again, this is all, history in the making, and this is a time to, show your kids, teach your kids, talk to your kids about this because it's coming to life. And unfortunately, they don't have Schoolhouse Rock like we did to, sing, I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill. I loved that. But you can find them on YouTube, actually. So that's another little learning resource. The other thing, I mentioned that little thing called politics that kind of comes into this. And that is, something that, again, everybody has an opinion about. And the opinion is based on, do you think it's appropriate? The legislature did not extend the state of emergency to May 28th as requested by the governor. So do you think that it's appropriate for the legislature to withhold $50 million of the $150 million request by the governor to provide whatever's needed and necessary to fight the pandemic? That is the question. And I put that out there to you to see how you think that will play out, especially in light of the lawsuit. The other thing that I wanted everyone to consider in looking at our current state of COVID-19 today is over the weekend, there was obviously a huge protest. And we've talked about some of them before in other episodes, and they've never been inside the Capitol before, the one just recently. But I'm puzzled by a couple different things, and I put this out there for you to think about. First of all, is it really necessary to bring assault weapons to what's supposed to be a peaceful gathering or assembly at the Capitol when there has been not one whisper of threat or violence to them being there? There was some criticism, certainly, about the traffic or access to the hospital or whatever, but it becomes a little disturbing that are they going to assassinate her? I mean, I don't understand how peaceful gatherings need assault weapons. Obviously, there's a constitutional right for them to assemble, and we've talked about before how there's a compelling state interest to protect the public, which is where she's coming from, and the individual rights for them to assemble and give their opinion, and free speech and everything else, which is certainly where these protesters are coming from. I also was thinking a lot about, and I was talking to one of my kids about this. I asked them, what is I showed them a picture of the Confederate flag, and I said, what does this mean to you? And then I really started thinking about, like, what we think about the Confederate flag and about slavery and oppression and, all of the ills and wills of that era and the Civil War, and is so different than what young people today think of the Confederate flag and what it stands for. And there's so many things about this that are different. And how they view it, and it's interesting. So anything that is objectionable, anything that you want to be a rebel, that's the symbol to show you don't agree. That's all it is to them, is a symbol that you don't agree. And that's so different than how older people construe the Confederate flag. So that's just another interesting thing about this generation. And there's all ages, all races, it's not unique who's protesting and who's at the Capitol. But what is unique, and this is what is just gnawing at me, is that they're not being safe. I live in the Detroit area. I practice law in the Detroit area and in other parts of the state sometimes. But here, it would be unheard of to leave your house without a mask. You would not walk into a grocery store without everyone wearing a mask. As a matter of fact, you're not even allowed in some stores or restaurants or establishments without a mask on. There's one-way aisles in our grocery stores. There are lines on the sidewalk to wait in line to get into the store. The lines are 8 feet apart or 6 feet apart. You're only allowed to have, I think it's 4 or 6 people per thousand square feet of a store at a time. And we are living in, an environment that is very, very, very protective. Whether you agree with it or not, you can't say that following these rules is a bad thing, even if you don't want to do it, and even if you don't agree with it. And there's nothing about it that's really hurting you, and it's probably helping you. And then you have people from the rest of the state. I was talking to a colleague in Cadillac, several times in the last couple of weeks, and it's just, they're staying home, but life as usual, and they can still have pizzas delivered, and they can still pretty much pick up from any restaurant, and their parking lot at Home Depot is loaded, and now go back to the protest, go back to the Capitol, and all those people from all over the state. And where is the responsibility? Part of the reason that we weren't allowed to go from southeastern Michigan to northern Michigan, even to our own homes, was because why would you want to take the risk of having us in your neighborhood and you getting sick because of how, invasive it is in our part of the state? And so you have these people gathering from everywhere. No one's wearing a mask. No one is using social distancing, and they're carrying assault rifles. So again, famous saying, I don't know who first told it to me or where I heard it from, but do you really need to drop an atomic bomb when a hand grenade will do? And when is enough enough? And can't we just follow the rules and get through this and get healthy and stop risking other people's health and well-being, and understand that this is kind of a greater good situation, and we all need to be nice, and we all need to be kind, and we need to be understanding, and we've all been home for a long time, and battling over who gets the internet and who gets the phone, and it's just, as I said, let's use this as a history lesson and a time to be kind and grateful and gracious. And so with that, and I apologize, evidently my dog, who's across the porch from me, is occupied by something that he's scratching and trying to get to that I can't see, but he can. So I will pause for a minute so that he can figure out what he's doing and not disturb us. But anyway, going on to our topic today, and we've talked about family law topics before. We've talked about child protection proceedings. We've talked about divorce. We've talked about getting, things that you can do now if you're thinking or preparing to get divorced. So those are all prior episodes, and they're, and also we've talked about, what to do if you get arrested, what to do if protective services comes to your door. And, those are all things that, you can continue to go back and watch again. We now have them all also on our YouTube channel, which is kind of cool because I don't know how to do all that stuff, but I have very, very excellent helpers. So today we're going to talk about the friend of the court. And who is the friend of the court? What is the friend of the court? And I will show you all this little book, which is the Oakland County Friend of the Court Handbook. But every single county in Michigan has one. The core model is the same. However, every county has adopted it a little bit differently with different rules and procedures in their own county. First and foremost, although there is the friend of the court is an office, and there it's not, and it has a lot of functions that assist people and assist their families as they're going through family court issues, whether it's a paternity case or it's a divorce or it's anything that has to do with custody, unless it's a child protection proceeding where protective services are involved. And so this is kind of the reference volume or the guidebook to the friend of the court. The handbook summarizes their duties and services, parental rights and responsibilities. It defines custody, parenting time, and child support. And it also it has copies of the law, and it has copies of the procedures. It talks about how to communicate with the friend of the court, how to check on the status of child support. This is the body that monitors child support. Now child support is collected through a system called MISDU, MISDU, that stands for the Michigan Support Disbursement Unit. I think that's the right letters, MISDU, which is in Lansing. So now what happens is there's a child support order with the child support provisions of a judgment or in order. There's a form filed called a uniform support order. That's filled out. Even if there's no child support going back and forth, that would be filled out as zeros. It must be filled out. That kind of opens your case at the friend of the court. It gives you the ability to enforce support, modify support, try to collect health care, collect medical expenses, or enforce provisions for health care and medical provisions. It allows, it is informal in that there will be a specialist who's assigned to your case for support. There'll be a family counselor who's assigned to your case for purposes of parenting time and custody. If your case is highly contentious, the judge may order an investigation by those people at the front of the court, where they would be gathering facts and information. They would be doing interviews. They might go visit school. They might come to your home. They would basically be putting together all the information that the court might need to make an appropriate decision regarding a certain issue. They deal with, as I mentioned, divorce cases, custody cases, paternity cases, family support cases. They deal with cases where parents live in one state and children live in other states, and how to take care of the interstate action to enforce support or to enforce parenting time. And basically all the financial issues. There are referees at the front of the court. Referees are hearing officers, and basically they act in the same capacity as a judge, in that they can hear evidence and make decisions. However, their decisions are considered recommendations, and then one party can object to the recommendation, and then it can go in front of the judge and have what's called a de novo hearing. A de novo hearing is like starting from zero. None of the evidence that was presented to the referee will be just flipped up there. There won't be a transcript. Instead, you're literally starting from zero and having this heard by a judge. Referees are either appointed by judges or selected by a committee that includes judges within the family division of the circuit court. They are not elected. They must be lawyers, so they have that background, but they are not elected. Referees make recommendations. If no one objects to them, then they become orders, and a judge will sign off on them. It's very important to take referee hearings seriously, and there's very tight timelines to when things can be objected to or not. And would you like to see the barking beast? I will flip my camera around. There he is. Here's the good dog. Okay, I'm trying to get rid of him, but it doesn't seem to be working. He's a little preoccupied. I'm going to throw something and hope he goes to get it. And Bandit, go. There. Now he's gone. Wow. So basically, going back to the front of the court, these are services that are available to families from the minute an action begins until the children are 18 years old, or if the child hasn't finished high school till 19 and a half. If you do have the option of opting out of the front of the court, and if you choose to opt out of the front of the court, that has to be in a judgment or a judgment of divorce or the order that ends the case, and then you do not have the front of the court ability to enforce the provisions of your judgment of divorce or your custody orders or your support orders. And both parties must agree to opt out if you're going to opt out, and both parties must agree to opt in if you're going to opt back in. So, a lot of people try to have peaceful untying of the knot, and they say, oh, we don't need to pay that $3.25 a month for the front of the court to monitor us for all these years. Everything's going to be fine. We don't need them. And so they opt out. And then they need enforcement because it's not all peaceful and, roses and lollipops anymore. And then it's a process to get back in. It happens, though, and it happens regularly, but it's a process. So I urge you to go to your circuit court website and Google and look at the front of the court handbook in different jurisdictions. I can tell you if you need creative ideas for parenting time, there are model parenting time provisions in each different county. I think that like Lapeer County has the best out-of-state parenting time guidelines in the state. Every county should take those guidelines and use them. And so a lot of problems could be solved without lawyers if clients were more informed. And so this is one resource for you. And if you have any questions, obviously you have lots of people to ask. The other thing the Friend of the Court does is they have the different programs. The SMILE program, which is making it livable for everyone. It's mandatory in Oakland County that every party that files for divorce or is involved in a divorce has to go to the SMILE program, and it teaches you about how to get your kids through this and how everyone can work together and be sensitive and get through it. There's a program called COPE, which is used a lot in Wayne County, which is a co-parenting program for parents that were never married. There's so many resources out there. There's a lot of these programs are online. I think that if you want to put yourself in the best position, understanding the Friend of the Court, the resources available, the classes available, anything that makes you child-centered and a better parent is always a good thing, even if you're not getting divorced. So with that, I will conclude today. I don't see any questions in the chat. So I will just leave you with the 5 reasons not to harm your loved ones during quarantine, and that is protective services workers are essential. Police are essential. The jails and juvenile detention are breeding grounds for COVID-19 and have a bit of difficulty with quarantine and appropriate health care. Number 4 is that parents can get in trouble for kids being kids at this time, just as they always can. And number 5, because most people don't look good in horizontal stripes. So with that, I will say goodbye to you. Stay home, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.